Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered why a man can chase you one moment and pull away the next? Why he can seem all in, only to turn distant and confusing overnight? It's not because you're hard to love. It's because men think in boxes. Yes, boxes. Every woman a man meets goes into one of three, and once you understand which box you're in, everything about his behavior suddenly makes sense. Tonight, I'm going to show you exactly how to decode the male mind, and once you do, you'll never question his mixed signals again. And ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something that most people never truly understand: how men think. For years, people have tried to decode the male mind, often painting it as complicated, detached, or emotionally unavailable. But the truth is, it's not that men don't feel deeply, it's that they process emotions differently. And once you understand the framework through which they think, everything changes. You stop taking their behavior personally. You stop guessing. You stop trying to decode mixed signals. You finally start to see the logic behind what looks like confusion. And there's something I call the three-box theory. Imagine a man's mind as three distinct boxes: one for the women he's interested in, one for the women he's not interested in, and one for the women he's uncertain about. Every woman he meets ends up in one of these three boxes, and the way he treats her from that moment on depends entirely on which box she's in. This isn't about judgment or ego. It's about how desire, emotion, and decision-making intersect in a man's psychology. And let's start with the first box, the interested box. When a man places a woman here, there's no confusion. He's drawn to her, not just physically but emotionally. He feels something magnetic. She captures his attention without forcing it. It's not about perfection, it's about energy. When a man puts you in this box, it's because he feels like you add something to his world. You make him want to show up. You make him want to be better. He doesn't have to think twice before texting. He doesn't weigh the pros and cons before making plans. He just wants to be around you. But here's what most people miss. Men don't put women in this box because of looks or charm alone. They do it because of how she makes him feel about himself. When he's with her, he feels alive, he feels capable, he feels like he's winning. A man's attraction isn't just about her beauty, it's about how his identity thrives in her presence. The moment he senses peace, joy, and admiration coming from her energy, his brain lights up with certainty. That's when he knows she's the one worth pursuing. And then there's the second box, the not interested box. And this one is brutal but necessary to understand. When a man places a woman here, it's not because she's not valuable. It's because he doesn't feel that spark of compatibility. He might like her as a friend. He might admire her qualities, but emotionally there's no ignition. And once she's in that box, it's incredibly difficult to move out of it. You can't convince your way out. You can't prove your worth. You can't perform your way into attraction, because attraction isn't logical, it's instinctive. And this is where so many people get trapped. They meet someone who gives them just enough attention to stay hopeful, but never enough effort to feel secure. And they think, if I just show how much I care, he'll see my value. But in truth, the more you chase, the more he feels confirmed that he doesn't need to. When a man has already decided you're in the not interested box, chasing him only deepens that decision. It tells him that he can give less and still keep your attention. It teaches him that your love is unconditional, even in the ounce of effort. And now the third box, the maybe box, is where the real psychological battle happens. This is the box of uncertainty. The man meets a woman and feels something, but not enough to commit. He's curious, but hesitant. He enjoys her company, but he's not sure if it's the right fit. So he keeps her there. He flirts, he checks in, he disappears, he returns. It's the box of confusion where his actions don't match his words. One day he seems all in, and the next he's distant. And if you've ever been in this box, you know how emotionally draining it feels. But here's the truth. When you're in a man's maybe box, the power dynamic shifts, not based on what he does, but on what you do next. You see, most women, when placed in this box, start trying to convince him. They overinvest, over-communicate, over-explain. They try to prove that they're worth choosing. But the secret is, the more you try to prove your worth to someone who's undecided, the less they value you. The moment you stop proving and start protecting your peace, everything changes. And the only way to move out of the maybe box is to make a decision before he does. It's to say, if you're unsure, that's okay, but I don't stay where I'm not seen clearly. That's not manipulation, that's self-respect. Because nothing triggers clarity in a man's mind like a woman who's willing to walk away from confusion. When you create space, you give him room to decide. And that's when he either steps up or fades away. Either outcome is a win because you're no longer waiting in emotional limbo. And here's what most people never realize. When a man is truly interested, he's not confused. He doesn't send mixed signals. He doesn't leave you guessing. Confusion itself is an answer. It tells you where you stand. The maybe box exists because too often we're willing to wait for someone else's certainty while sacrificing our own. We keep hoping they'll wake up one day and see what's been in front of them all along. But love doesn't grow in uncertain, it grows in mutual recognition. And men think in compartments because it helps them process emotion without becoming overwhelmed. They organize feelings like files. They need clarity, separation, and direction. The problem arises when we try to live in between their boxes, waiting for them to sort things out. But when you understand the three-box theory, you stop playing emotional roulette. You stop gambling on potential. You stop mistaking mixed signals for depth. You begin to value decisiveness over promises, action over words. And then when you show up with that kind of energy, everything shifts. You no longer ask, does he like me? Instead, you ask, does he show up for me? You no longer chase reassurance. You observe consistency. You no longer settle for maybe because you've learned that maybe is the silent enemy of your peace. The moment you start treating uncertainty as rejection, you elevate your standard. You become the kind of person who inspires clarity just by refusing to live without it. And a man will always treat you based on the box he believes you belong in. But your job isn't to change his box. Your job is to live in such a way that you never need to fit into anyone's. When you embody confidence, boundaries, and self-worth, you automatically eliminate confusion. You teach others that you don't need to be chosen to feel valuable. You choose yourself first. And from that energy, the right people recognize your worth without hesitation. And every man's thinking is guided by instinct, ego, and emotion. But the one thing that cuts through all of it is certainty. Certainty in who you are, certainty in what you want, certainty in what you will and won't tolerate. When you embody that, you stop being the woman in the maybe box and you become the one who defines the boxes. You stop reacting to how men think and you start influencing it. You teach them the voice. Rough your presence. That emotional clarity isn't something to fear. It's something to rise to. And because at the end of the day, the three-box theory isn't just about how men categorize women. It's about how you categorize yourself. Do you see yourself as an option or a priority? Do you wait for someone to decide your value or do you decide it yourself? The moment you choose certainty over confusion, peace over potential, you stop chasing understanding and start living from it. And because at the end of the day, the three-box theory isn't just about how men categorize women. It's about how you categorize yourself. Do you see yourself as an option or a priority? Do you wait for someone to decide your value or do you decide it yourself? The moment you choose certainty over confusion, peace over potential, you stop chasing understanding and start living from it. But let's go deeper, because understanding the three-box theory is only the beginning. Knowing where you stand in a man's mind gives you awareness, but awareness is only power when you use it. The real transformation happens when you start changing the way you respond to those boxes, when you stop trying to control which box he puts you in and instead focus on how you carry yourself regardless of it. That's when you become magnetic in a way that can't be ignored. And see, men are intuitive in their own way. They can sense when a woman is desperate for validation, when she's waiting for him to choose her. But they can also sense when a woman is grounded in her own worth, when she isn't afraid of walking away from uncertainty. That energy shifts everything. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't need to be in your life to feel valuable, but if I am, it will be because we both choose each other from a place of clarity. And the moment a man senses that energy, he begins to evaluate differently. He stops thinking, can I have her? And starts thinking, am I good enough to keep her? That shift is where respect begins, and respect is the foundation of lasting attraction. Without it, everything else fades. And so let's look at what happens inside those boxes over time. The interested box is built on momentum. If a man truly values you, he invests time, consistency, and energy. He pursues you with intention, not confusion. But even then, that box can shift. Why? Because attraction is easy. Maintenance is the real test. What keeps you in that box isn't being accommodating, it's being inspiring. It's continuing to show up as someone who has her own goals, her own passion, her own life. Men fall deeply for women who don't make them their entire world. They fall for women who have a world so full of meaning that being with her feels like being invited into something special. And the danger is that too many people enter a man's interested box and then immediately start building their entire emotional home around it. They stop being themselves. They mold their words, their schedule, their entire mood to revolve around his attention. But what they don't realize is that this begins to drain the very energy that made them attractive in the first place. The more you lose yourself trying to secure someone else's love, the more that love slips through your fingers. And men respect mystery, not the kind that plays games, but the kind that comes from depth, the kind that says, I am still learning who I am, and I want you to discover me piece by piece. When a man feels that, he doesn't take you for granted, because he knows there's always more to uncover. He stays curious, engaged, and connected. But when you give everything too soon, your heart, your time, your emotional energy, you remove the natural rhythm of discovery that fuels attraction. And now in the not interested box, people often get stuck in denial. They see the signs but refuse to accept them. They hold on to hope, thinking that persistence might turn indifference into affection. But love doesn't grow from convincing, it grows from connection. The truth is, when someone has shown you who they are and what they feel, your job is not to argue with reality, it's to respect it. That respect is not for them, it's for yourself. Because every time you cling to someone who has clearly placed you in that second box, you tell yourself a story that you're not enough. And that story is far more damaging than rejection itself. And when you learn to gracefully accept disinterest, you regain your power. You stop auditioning for someone else's approval. You start realizing that rejection isn't the opposite of attraction. It's redirection. It's life's way of protecting you from someone who couldn't meet you where you deserve to be met. And now, the maybe box, this is where most emotional battles are fought. This is where people waste months, sometimes years, waiting for someone to decide. It's where promises are made but never fulfilled, where attention is given but commitment is withheld. And what's so dangerous about this box is that it feeds off hope. The smallest gesture, a text, a call, a weekend together, it keeps you hooked, thinking something meaningful is building. But deep down, you know it's not moving anywhere. You're just circling uncertainty, waiting for clarity that never comes. And here's what happens psychologically in this dynamic. The longer you stay in the maybe box, the more invested you become in changing it. It's no longer about love, it's about validation. You start to believe that if you can just get him to choose you, it will prove your worth. But that belief is a trap, because no one else's choice can define your value. Only you can do that. And the moment you reclaim your decision-making power, everything shifts. You stop waiting for his verdict and start giving your own. You begin to ask, is this situation feeding my peace or draining it? Do I feel loved or just tolerated? Do I feel chosen or just convenient? And when the answer hurts, you remind yourself that walking away from confusion isn't loss, it is leadership. And you lead your own emotional life when you stop letting someone else's indecision control your direction. Because here's the truth, men don't just categorize women, they respond to how women categorize themselves. If you act like an option, you'll be treated like one. But if you carry yourself like someone who knows her worth, even the most uncertain man will have to make a choice. Step up or step aside. And sometimes stepping aside is the greatest gift he can give you, because space clears the path for someone who doesn't need to think twice about your value, someone who doesn't need to figure it out because he already knows. But here's something important. Men also live by the three-box theory when it comes to themselves. Every man has boxes in his own life. The man he is, the man he pretends to be, and the man he's trying to become. The man he is today might not yet be capable of the love he wants to give. The man he pretends to be might look confident, successful, emotionally available, but underneath, he's still learning how to trust, how to lead with heart instead of fear. And the man he's trying to become is the one who learns through the presence or absence of the right woman. And so when you interact with a man, remember, you're not just seeing how he categorizes you, you're witnessing which version of himself he's living in. And that's why timing matters. A man might recognize your value, but still keep you in the maybe box because he hasn't yet grown into the kind of man who can honor what he's been given. That's not your fault. That's his evolution. But it's not your responsibility to wait for it. And you don't grow by standing still while someone else catches up. You grow by moving forward, by embodying the kind of strength that says, when you're ready to meet me where I am, I'll still be growing. And ironically, that's the energy that often makes a man rise to meet you. Because when you stop trying to be chosen and start living like someone worth choosing, you set a standard that either inspires him or reveals him. And then that's what decoding how men think is truly about. It's not about manipulation or figuring out what to say to get a certain reaction. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about understanding that his behavior isn't a mystery, it's communication. When he's consistent, he's saying, I'm interested. When he's distant, he's saying, I'm not ready. When he's inconsistent, he's saying, I'm confused. And your response to that communication determines everything. And you don't need to analyze every word or decode every text. You simply observe patterns. Because love is not found in moments of intensity. It's revealed in patterns of consistency. That's where truth lives. And so when you understand the three-box theory, you're not just understanding men, you're mastering yourself. You begin to trust your instincts. You stop needing reassurance because your peace becomes your compass. You stop chasing certainty from others because you've built it within yourself. And that's when relationships stop being a test of your worth and start becoming an extension of it. And the more you trust that energy, the more the right people are drawn to you. Because confidence without arrogance, peace without passivity, strength without defensiveness, those are rare qualities. And when a man meets a woman who carries those qualities, his three-box theory doesn't matter anymore because she doesn't fit into a category. She becomes the exception. She becomes the standard that rewrites how he thinks altogether. And she becomes the standard that rewrites how he thinks altogether. And because when a man encounters a woman who carries herself with certainty, self-respect, and emotional calm, something inside him shifts. It's not just attraction, it's awakening. He starts to see what genuine connection feels like. He realizes that real love isn't found in control or ego or unpredictability. It's found in clarity, consistency, and emotional presence. And when he feels that, he can't go back to shallow connections. He starts craving depth, honesty, and peace because he's tasted what emotional maturity looks like in human form. And that's the silent power of understanding how men think. It's not to manipulate their psychology. It's to elevate the way you show up so profoundly that it brings out the best version of him. When you operate from a place of grounded confidence, you stop feeding his confusion. You give him clarity without pressure. You allow him to feel masculine without needing to dominate. And in that balance, something magical happens. Respect turns into desire, and desire turns into devotion. But here's the part that's often misunderstood. Men are not always afraid of love. They're afraid of what love demands. It demands vulnerability. It demands exposure. It demands that they confront the parts of themselves they've kept hidden. Most men aren't scared of commitment. They're scared of being seen too deeply. They worry that if they show their fears, their flaws, their uncertainty, they'll lose your admiration. And that fear often causes them to retreat into silence or inconsistency. And But the women who hold power in a man's mind are the ones who don't chase that retreat. They don't force conversations that aren't ready to happen. They create space, not as punishment, but as patience. Because they understand that sometimes a man's withdrawal isn't rejection, it's reflection. He's processing. He's testing his emotions against his logic. And when you don't chase, when you don't panic, when you don't try to control his response, you give him the psychological safety to come back stronger. And this is the balance that separates neediness from strength. The difference isn't in how much you care, it's in how you carry that care. Needy energy says, I can't feel secure unless you validate me. Confident energy says, I care deeply, but my peace doesn't depend on your reaction. That distinction changes everything. It communicates maturity, emotional regulation, and self-awareness, the three things that pull a man out of confusion and into clarity. And now let's look at what happens inside a man's mind when he meets a woman who understands this dynamic. At first, he might test it, not consciously, but emotionally. He might pull back, go quiet, or act uncertain just to see what happens. Because part of him expects chaos. He expects the reaction he's used to getting. But when you don't feed that chaos, when you stay calm, grounded, and centered, he starts realizing that you're different. He starts realizing that your value doesn't rise and fall with his attention. And that's when curiosity turns into respect. And respect is the gateway to love. Without respect, attraction fades. Without respect, connection feels temporary. But when a man respects your boundaries, your standards, and your emotional maturity, his admiration turns into something deeper than chemistry. He doesn't just want to be around you, he wants to be worthy of being around you. That's when he moves you permanently into that interested box, not because of attraction alone, but because of reverence. And this is where emotional power truly lies. Not in being perfect, but in being peaceful. Not in being hard to get, but in being hard to shake. You become the kind of woman who doesn't need to demand loyalty because her presence naturally inspires it. You don't need to prove your worth because everything about your behavior communicates it. The way you set boundaries, the way you speak your truth without aggression, the way you walk away without resentment, these are the things that make a lasting imprint on a man's mind. And most people think men fall in love through passion, but passion is only the spark. What keeps the fire alive is peace. It's the sense that when he's with you, he can breathe, that he doesn't have to perform or pretend, that he's safe to be real. And ironically, that safety is built not by how much you give, but by how much you respect yourself while giving. And now, this doesn't mean you don't show emotion. It means you express emotion with composure. You can miss him, but still hold your boundaries. You can care, but still expect effort. You can forgive, but still require growth. Emotional intelligence isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's the balance of heart and logic that allows love to thrive without chaos. And when you start living this way, you'll notice something profound. Men start showing up differently. The ones who are inconsistent either rise to meet your energy or fade away entirely. The ones who are unsure start making decisions. And the ones who truly value you don't just talk about potential, they build reality. Because when you embody certainty, it forces others to choose between aligning with you or losing access to you. And here's something powerful to remember. Every man is subconsciously drawn to women who mirror the qualities he wishes he had more of. If he's lost, he's drawn to your clarity. If he's insecure, he's drawn to your confidence. If he's chaotic, he's drawn to your peace. But what keeps him there isn't your ability to fix him. It's your refusal to lose yourself in him. When you stay grounded in your own emotional truth, you become both the mirror and the anchor. You reflect his potential, but you stay rooted in your value. And that's why you must never underestimate the power of emotional boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls, they're clarity. They don't push people away, they filter who gets close. When a man meets a woman with boundaries, he feels challenged, not in a competitive way, but in a way that wakes him up. He realizes he can't slide through on charm or chemistry alone. He has to show up with integrity. He has to earn her consistency by matching it, and that process either matures him or removes him, and both outcomes are a win. And this is why the three-box theory is not just about how men think. It's about how you lead the emotional tone of every connection you enter. You teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. You teach them how to show up by how you respond to uncertainty. You teach them what's acceptable by what you tolerate. Every time you choose peace over panic, distance over desperation, clarity over confusion, you reprogram not only how men see you, but how they see themselves. And because ultimately, when a man meets a woman who has mastered her emotions, he meets the rarest kind of energy, the kind that doesn't just attract, but transforms. You become a mirror that reflects both his strength and his weakness. You awaken in him the desire to rise, not out of pressure, but out of inspiration. You show him what healthy love feels like, simply by refusing to settle for anything less. And what's beautiful is that when you operate from that place, you stop fearing loss, because you realize that losing someone who couldn't meet your standard isn't a loss, it's alignment. You begin to understand that the right connection doesn't require constant reassurance. It doesn't keep you anxious, confused, or guessing. It brings peace, it brings certainty, it brings growth. And when you start living with that awareness, your entire energy changes. You walk differently, you speak differently, you attract differently. You stop chasing closure because you understand that peace is your closure. You stop replaying mixed signals because you've learned to trust patterns over promises. And you stop seeing rejection as a wound. It becomes information. It tells you where to redirect your love, your focus, your time. And men who encounter a woman with that kind of energy don't forget her. Even if things end, even if life takes them in different directions, she stays in his mind, not as a regret, but as a reminder of what emotional depth looks like, a reminder of what respect feels like, a reminder of what real connection is supposed to be. And that's the power of understanding how men think, not to win them over, but to evolve so fully within yourself that you no longer need to. And because when you reach that level of emotional maturity, you no longer ask, which box am I in? You already know you're in the one you created for yourself. The one where peace is priority, self-worth is non-negotiable, and love is mutual, not conditional. And the one where peace is priority, self-worth is non-negotiable, and love is mutual, not conditional. And because once you begin to live from that truth, something inside you changes. You no longer approach relationships from a place of fear. You no longer cling to attention, chase validation, or confuse effort with affection. Instead, you start to attract from a place of abundance. You realize that love isn't something to win, it's something to align with. You stop fighting to be seen because you finally see yourself. And when you see yourself clearly, you stop tolerating anything that clouds that vision. And this is what emotional power truly is. It's not about dominance, control, or indifference. It's about grace. It's the quiet confidence that says, I know who I am, I know what I bring, and I won't shrink to make anyone comfortable. That kind of self-assurance doesn't just change how men treat you, it changes how you treat yourself. It becomes your filter, your standard, your guide. You stop reacting to inconsistency and start responding with composure. You stop asking, why doesn't he choose me? And start asking, why am I still choosing someone who doesn't show up for me? And because the truth is, when you truly understand how men think, you stop taking things personally. You begin to see behavior as informate, iron, not as a reflection of your worth. If he's distant, it's not because you're unlovable, it's because he's unsure. If he's inconsistent, it's not because you did something wrong, it's because he's unaligned. If he's silent, it's not because you're not enough, it's because he's avoiding something within himself. That awareness frees you. It takes you out of emotional chaos and puts you back in control of your peace. And men respect women who don't make excuses for inconsistency. They might test your boundaries, but they can't ignore your standards. Every time you hold your boundary with quiet confidence, you send a signal. I'm not here to compete for your attention. I'm here to match your energy. That message is powerful because it shifts the entire emotional dynamic. It turns the relationship from one of pursuit and performance to one of balance and equality. And it's that balance that sustains real connection. See, love doesn't thrive in imbalance. It thrives in respect. It's built on the mutual understanding that both people bring something valuable to the table. It's not about one chasing while the other retreats. It's about both meeting in the middle because they recognize the same emotional currency. When you embody that energy, you stop being an option in someone's life and start becoming an anchor. You create safety through your clarity. But to embody that, you have to stop seeking love as a solution to loneliness. You have to start seeing it as a partnership that adds to an already full life. When you make love your source of identity, every rejection feels like a crisis. But when you make love a reflection of your wholeness, rejection becomes just another redirection. You stop needing someone to complete you because you understand that you were never incomplete. That shift not only changes what you attract, it changes what you accept, and you start to become less interested in temporary affection and more interested in emotional integrity. You start to crave depth of excitement, consistency over chemistry, alignment over intensity. And when you operate from that place, you automatically elevate the kind of man who's drawn to you. Because men who thrive on chaos won't be able to connect with your peace. They'll fall away. But men who are ready for something real will be magnetized by your presence. And that's what the three-box theory reveals at its core. It's not just about understanding men's minds. It's about mastering your own emotional discernment. It teaches you to stop chasing the wrong box and start choosing yourself, to stop fighting for clarity from others and start creating it within, to stop settling for potential and start aligning with action. Because no matter how much chemistry or connection you feel, if it's not followed by consistency, it's not love, it's confusion. And the power comes when you start using that awareness as your guide, when you can look at someone's behavior without sugarcoating it, when you can acknowledge, he likes me, but he's not ready. And instead of trying to fix him, you gracefully move on. That's not cold, it's compassionate clarity. You're not punishing him, you're protecting your energy. You're honoring your standards instead of sacrificing them for potential. And that kind of emotional discipline is rare. Most people live in the gray area because they're afraid to make a decision. They think staying in maybe is safer than walking away. But staying in confusion doesn't protect your heart. It prolongs your pain. The longer you wait for someone to choose you, the more you abandon yourself. The moment you decide that uncertainty isn't enough, you free yourself from the emotional waiting room. And here's something profound. Every time you walk away from someone who can't see your worth, you're not losing love, you're proving it to yourself. You're reminding yourself that peace matters more than potential. You're showing yourself that your time and energy are sacred, and that self-respect radiates in every area of your life. It changes your friendships, your career, your habits, and your sense of peace. Because when you stop settling emotionally, you stop settling everywhere. And when a man encounters a woman who has that kind of self-awareness, he can feel it before she even speaks. It's in her tone, her posture, her energy. She's calm but firm, warm but wise, open but not naive. She's the kind of woman who doesn't just demand respect, she inspires it. And when a man realizes that she doesn't need him to define her, he either rises to her level or steps aside. Either way, she wins. And because real attraction isn't built on needing someone, it's built on choosing them. When you're whole, your love becomes a gift, not a plea. You love freely, but not blindly. You give deeply, but not recklessly. You open your heart, but not your boundaries. That's the kind of love that transforms people, not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it's rooted in truth. And the beauty of all this is that the more emotionally intelligent you become, the less you fear endings, because you realize that endings aren't failures, they're transitions. Every relationship teaches you something about what you value, what you need, and who you're becoming. And once you understand that, you stop clinging to what's leaving and start preparing for what's next. You no longer chase closure from others because you've learned to create it for yourself. And And that is the essence of emotional freedom. When you stop fighting for clarity from people who thrive on confusion, you stop suffering. When you stop over-explaining your worth to those who can't recognize it, you stop bleeding energy. When you stop chasing temporary highs and start building emotional standards, you stop settling for fragments of love. You learn that real connection doesn't come from proving your value. It comes from living it. And so when you find yourself wondering where you stand in someone's life, remember this. You never have to beg for the box you belong in. The right person will make it clear. They won't confuse you, delay you, or play with your emotions. They'll meet your effort, match your energy, and protect your peace. Until that happens, your job isn't to chase clarity, it's to live in it. And you do that by trusting your intuition, honoring your boundaries, and believing that walking away from what doesn't serve you will always lead you closer to what does. Because love isn't about being chosen, it's about being recognized. And recognition only happens when you show up as your authentic, unapologetic self. And when you live that way, you don't just decode how men think, you rewrite the entire narrative. You stop playing by their rules and start creating your own. You stop being the woman who waits to be placed in a box and become the woman who defines her own category. The one no man forgets, not because she fought to stay, but because she had the courage to walk when clarity was missing.